days after President Trump called on lawmakers to find a compromise on immigration reforms, a small bipartisan group of 6 senators say they've done just that. The agreement was expected to include funding for border security, protections for undocumented immigrants brought to the U.S. as children, and changes to the way the State Department approves visas. But in a private meeting, a proposal to restore protections to immigrants from Haiti, El Salvador, and certain African countries who were until recently protected from deportation reportedly prompted the president to question, why are we having all these people from shithole countries come here? He then suggested that the United States should instead bring more people from countries like Norway, whose prime minister he met on Wednesday.
That's the racist element. Norwegians are white. They're Northern Europeans. He was referring earlier in his vulgar comment to Africans and Haitians, who are mostly of African descent. These are racist comments. He said things like this before when he talked about Nigerians who won't go back to live in huts, and he talked about Haitians who bring AIDS to the United States. These are all confirmations of what a lot of people have long suspected, that he harbors racism.
Republican Representative Mia Love, a Haitian American, responded on Twitter saying the president's comments are unkind, divisive, elitist, and fly in the face of our nation's values. This behavior is unacceptable from the leader of our nation.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
It's not the first time the president has spoken disparagingly of immigrants, and his spokesperson didn't deny the comments. Certain Washington politicians choose to fight for foreign countries. President Trump will always fight for the American people, he said. President Trump is fighting for permanent solutions that make our country stronger by welcoming those who can contribute to our society, grow our economy, and assimilate into our great nation. The president says he wants a merit-based immigration system, not one based on family connections or a lottery. And his comments suggest he's not yet ready to accept the compromise reached by senators.
First, our chief White House correspondent John Karl is tracking all the latest fallout from Washington. Good morning, John.
Good morning, George. Just as he seemed to be making progress on a bipartisan immigration deal, the president blew it all up with a vulgar remark that struck many as blatantly racist. Haiti and African countries with a profane slur, adding, "Why do we need more Haitians?" The president suggested the U.S. should bring in more immigrants from countries like Norway. At first, the White House didn't deny the president said those words, and now the president is tweeting, quote, "Never said anything derogatory about Haitians other than Haiti is, obviously, a very poor and troubled country. I have a wonderful relationship with Haitians." But news of the president's crude insult drew bipartisan condemnation.
This remark by the president of the United States smacks of blatant racism.
His comments do not represent America.
Listen, this is not help at all. It's a distraction.
Republican Congresswoman Mia Love, the first Haitian American elected to Congress, called on the president to apologize, saying his comments are, quote, "unkind, divisive, elitist, and fly in the face of our nation's values." Jeb Bush tweeted, "I hope today's comments were just a crass and flippant mistake and do not reflect the hateful racism they imply." It's far from the first time Trump has made racially offensive comments. On the very first day of his campaign, he insulted Mexicans.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
And in August, he responded to violence at the neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville by saying there were fine people both among the protesters and the white supremacists.
You also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
The president's latest outburst came after he brought Democrats and Republicans together for a constructive meeting at the White House on Tuesday, urging a deal to provide legal status to the so-called Dreamers, undocumented immigrants brought to the U.S. as children.
This should be a bipartisan bill. This should be a bill of love. Truly, it should be a bill of love, and we can do that.
Before yesterday's outburst, it appeared that a deal was imminent. Now that's in doubt. There were 7 members of Congress at yesterday's meeting. The only one to comment is the lone Democrat, Dick Durbin.
To no surprise, the president started tweeting this morning denying that he used those words. It is not true.
And now the president is up and tweeting, saying that the bipartisan deal that was presented to him yesterday was a big step backwards, adding, quote, U.S. would be forced to take large numbers of people from high crime countries which are doing badly. And now another tweet where he seems to be denying what he said, saying the language used by me at the DACA meeting was tough, but was not the language used. What was really tough was the outlandish proposal made. Unclear if that is a full denial of what he said. George, we've asked for clarification.
He went on to say, never said anything derogatory about Haitians other than Haiti is obviously a very poor and troubled country. Never said, take them out. Here to discuss the foreign diplomatic impact of this comment is P.J. Crowley, former Assistant Secretary of State under President Obama's administration. P.J., what are your thoughts on the president's comments, and what do you think it can mean for particularly Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and even the entire State Department?
Well, it puts anyone who is representing the United States around the world in a very difficult and awkward situation. Let's think of the American reputation as a financial market. And right now, because of the president and his comments and his tweets, our reputation is in recession. And with that, our ability to positively influence the world is in decline.
You worked at the State Department. How difficult is it really, PJ, for a situation like this when you're talking about the role and the job that diplomats play?
Well, we have a national narrative about ourselves. Bring us your hungry, your poor, yearning to be free. And the president is destroying that narrative in the eyes of many around the world. And it makes it very, very difficult for the Secretary of State, for diplomats to represent the United States in this kind of environment, not knowing from day to day or hour to hour, what the president's going to say, what the president's going to tweet, and the turmoil that those comments will undoubtedly create.
You say we don't know the turmoil and what could happen, but do you really see countries distancing themselves over the president's comments, especially as we've heard various reports of comments he's made in the past? Do you think they can separate that from President Trump and from, the entire country as a whole?
Well, I think it's damaging for President Trump. Think of that moment with Margaret Thatcher and Mikhail Gorbachev, where Thatcher said, this is a guy that we can do business with. The world is taking the exact opposite conclusion with respect to President Trump. This is a guy that they are distancing themselves from. And even if we move from rhetoric to action, the president spent the first year, tearing things down. He withdrew the United States, from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, from the Paris Climate Agreement, and the world is not waiting for him to decide what's better. The world is just moving on without him.
Do you think the White House feels any need to sort of come around these comments and to try and rise above it, especially with African countries in particular? Do you see them doing any sort of outreach?
Well, it'll be interesting to see, how those within the Trump administration respond to this particular moment. We had, a number of figures within the administration criticize the president directly about his comments from Charlottesville, Virginia last year. The Secretary of State did that. It'll be notable to see where the Secretary of State, takes the president to task and says, this is not how we view the world. And Mr. President, your comments are reducing the ability of the United States to positively influence events around the world.
Joining me, Van Jones, Bakari Sellers, Jason Miller, Anna Navarro, and Mark Lauder. And in your opinion, is there any other way to interpret this comment other than being just racist?
Of course, there's no other way to interpret it. This is not an isolated comment. The first thing he did when he started running was call Mexicans rapists. He has gone on to equate white supremacists in Charlottesville to the people protesting against them. He has called black athletes sons of bitches. He has feuded with the congresswoman who represents Little Haiti, Frederica Wilson. Last year at this time, he was feuding with civil rights icon John Lewis. This is not a coincidence. This is a pattern of behavior. We have a racist, a shameless racist who has hijacked the Republican Party, who has hijacked the Oval Office. And this country needs to stand up against this and tell him that we will not let him divide us by color, by race, by ethnicity, by class, by economy. We will not be quiet. We will not allow this. Donald Trump, this is not America. This is not America. And when we will fight against your division, your racism, your anger, your hatred, hatred and all the horrible things you are trying to do to this country.
Van Jones, I mean, should this come as a surprise to people?
Well, I mean, it's not only racist, it's also just inaccurate. I mean, numbers sometimes matter. 33% of Americans have college degrees. God bless everybody, it's a lot of hard work. Now we got student debt. 43% of African immigrants have college degrees, okay? 11% of white people in America have a graduate degree. 25% of Nigerian Americans have a graduate degree. So what is he talking about? Part of the thing is that when you're relying on just horrible stereotypes, by the way, Melania Trump, our first lady, who I admire greatly, is from Slovenia, not exactly the jewel of Europe, Slovenia, but she's welcome here and Nigerians are not. There's something wrong with the way this president is proceeding. I don't think anybody here on this panel can defend these kind of comments. If you want to have a conversation about immigration policy, you can have it without insulting whole continents and whole countries, especially when you have African immigrants coming to this country, making America better every day and being disrespected by this president.
Jason, I mean, the idea that all Haitians have AIDS, that they should get out, that the president doesn't want more black people from Africa or from Haiti, wants more white people from Norway, is that defensible?
So, Anderson, that's not at all what the president said. And so let's talk about the context of what today was.
He didn't say that all Haitians have AIDS?
No.
According to the New York Times.
No, and the White House. Well, Anderson, the White House has denied that.
Right, they denied that when it was a meeting of White House staff, but when it's a group of bipartisan lawmakers today, they can't deny it because bipartisan lawmakers heard it. So, you think it's such a big jump for him to say all Haitians have AIDS, to him saying
Anderson,
that it's a shithole?
Anderson, I don't think the point here is for you or me or anyone else on this panel to put words into the president's mouth.
We don't need to put words in the president's mouth.
I think
the president is putting racist words in his own mouth.
So
anyway, go ahead.
He was not making racist comments. So today, the whole point of the meeting is the fact that President Trump, unlike Democrats and Republicans in the past, is actually going to get something done on Dreamers, something I don't think he's getting any credit for.
We're talking about Haitians and black people from Africa.
But hold on. So this is the meeting, having a meeting, bipartisan meeting, talk about what we're going to do about the 700,000 or 800,000 Dreamers who are here. They get to the section on overall comprehensive immigration reform. Again, something that Obama couldn't get done, Bush couldn't get done, but Trump's going to get it done. So they get to the section on merit-based immigration. And the president has been very clear that he doesn't think there should be carve-outs from any country, not from Norway, not from Great Britain, not from Haiti, not from El Salvador, not from any country does he think there should be special carve-outs by each country. He thinks it should be merit-based by each person. And that's something that Canada does.
What does that have to do with talking about S-hole?
Because, hold on, because so he very specifically.
So there's more people with merit from Norway than there are from Haiti and from Africa.
The point
Africa, by the way, an enormous continent full of dozens of countries.
It should be by the individual. It shouldn't be carve-outs. The plan that these lawmakers came back to him actually still had these carve-outs for countries that are on the TPS list, countries that are in severely economically distressed places that are sending us tens of thousands of people who have literally, if they even have the shirts on their backs, then they're lucky.
Have you been to Africa? Do you know how many countries are in Africa? Does the president know? I know the president likes to make up countries that are not actually in Africa and that don't actually exist. But there are actually incredibly developed and well-off countries in Africa. In fact, the president, when the president was speaking to black African leaders, he was talking about all his rich friends who are making so much money in Africa.
Anderson, respectfully speaking, you're leaving a lot out for the conversation because as you even heard from Jim Acosta and we've heard from previous blocks, not only did the president say when he was thrown out of their country and he's talking about countries that are doing much better economically, he said Norway or countries in Asia. He didn't go and name specific countries in Asia. So he's talking around the world, but he's like, why would you go and specifically say that there need to be carve-outs from countries that are so economically distressed?
So he's willing to generalize about all Asians as being people who are working hard and deserve the merit of coming here, but all Africans are not. How is that not something by race?
He's making the point that it should be by individuals and it shouldn't be going and targeting
So everybody in
specific
Asia
countries.
is hardworking and deserves to come here.
And Anderson, that's not what the president said. It should be, the whole point is it should be on merit-based system, just like the way that Canada does it on a points-based system. It's a pretty smart, comprehensive immigration idea. I think ultimately the president's going to get it done. And this is getting twisted around.
I want you to respond to that.
This is not, I mean, you're trying to make it sound like... Go ahead, Van.
No matter what, listen, I give you an A for effort, but the reality is you haven't addressed the issue that has alarmed the entire world. When you say S-whole countries, and then you say Norway is welcome and these people are not, That is not a smart conversation about immigration policy. You and I can disagree and argue about skills-based versus TPS versus anything else, but that's not what was happening.
And
What's
Van,
happening
there was
is you have a
salty
president.
language.
Hold on a
salty
second.
language
You got
on both
your
sides.
chance. And that's not what's happening. What's happening is you have a president that has shown his heart to the country. He showed his heart, and in his heart, people from Africa, people from Africa, almost a billion people live in Africa. To him, they all are S-hole people who live in S-hole places. That is wrong, and you should denounce it. By the way, sir, and Jason, I know you very well. You should denounce it. You should denounce that, Jason. I know you very well. And why won't you denounce that? Why won't you denounce S-hole nation?
Everyone in the world wants to come to the U.S.
Why won't you denounce it?
Because this is a great place. If we're going to
remain
remain
the shining city on the hill, do you think Africa is an S-hole continent?
We have to reform.
Jason.
We have to reform.
Maybe we do.
I think that the president is absolutely
I'm talking
right.
man to man. I'm talking to you person to person.
And don't try to bait me here, Van. I'm giving you a straight answer that we need to have.
Africa is an S-hole continent, yes or no?
You know what? There are a lot of S-hole places all around the world.
Do you think Africa is an S-hole continent?
Van,
you think Haiti is an S-hole
country? It's a great effort to try to bait me because on the left, you've run out of ideas. You've run out of ideas, and so you're trying to bait me on something.
You want to have a conversation about immigration policy?
Okay, let me bring in Bakari Sellers.
Let me just say this.
Nobody can hear when we're all talking. Bakari, we haven't heard from you. When Jason is saying, that there's a lot of shithole country. I mean, why don't let's just use the word the president is using. If it's good enough for the president of the United States to use it, I think the American people deserve to hear what words the president is using. The idea that all countries in Africa are shitholes is just woefully ignorant. It's just moronic, and it shows the president knows nothing.
Yeah, but I think that, I have to give Jason the name of my chiropractor for getting in that pretzel to defend this nonsense. The comments that the president made were asinine, they were ignorant, any other adjective you want to add to this discussion. But why are we surprised? Why is this breaking news? If we go back in history, this is the same man who was sued by the Department of Justice and used to put a little C on black people's applications for color. Why are we surprised? This is the same person who was sued by African American and minority dealers in his casino. Why are we surprised? This is the same man who still has not apologized for the Central Park 5. Down here in South Carolina, we look out and throw our hands up to black folk and say, we have tried to tell you this is who this man was. It's not as if he is just showing you his heart today. Stokely Carmichael once said, a white man who wants to lynch me, that is his problem. A white man who has the power to lynch me, that is my problem. Racism is a question of power, not a question of attitude. And so when we say that the president of the United States is racist, it's because he harbors these views and he has the power to implement policy which subjugate these people to oppressive systems. This is not rocket science, and I'm not surprised at all. And I'm actually more surprised, and this is what drives me up a wall, Anderson. This is the problem with the discussion that we're having. People want to say, oh my God, he's talking to economic anxiety voters, or he's giving red meat to his base. The hell with all of that. I am sick and tired of the good people in this country who support Donald Trump, who will not stand up and call this for what it is. We have an issue with race in this country that dates long back before Donald Trump and long back before Barack Obama and George Bush and Bill Clinton and George Bush. But we have never dealt with that issue because good people sit on their hands. Yeah. If you cannot sit here on live TV and say that what the president of the United States, be his friend or not his friend, said was racist, then you are not contributing to breaking this a more perfect union. This is the frustrating part of this whole thing.